Can you guys tell me why it is that you got involved with this project in the first place? What it was that got you interested in it?
Well, I think for me, I think it was an excitement about the concept of moving beyond a very polarized debate. I mean, that's my experience with all of this up until this project had largely been reading or experiencing or researching viewpoints that were very divergent and nothing that was really illuminating the nuances within all of these issues. So for me, it was an excitement to explore all of that kind of shading within of the gray area that isn't really talked about very much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think for me, I'd been a teacher a long time, and when you talked about your students coming to you and being honest enough to talk about some of their struggles, and that you just felt a need to get their voices be heard. I thought that was really powerful.
For me, when I first heard of this project, I just felt immediately like it was something that I wanted to be a part of in some respect, simply because I felt like this was a topic that the church was going to have to start talking about at some point. That this wasn't something that, as a Christian, and I was actually involved in a church at the time too when I first heard about this, that it was something that we couldn't just keep ignoring. That people had to start talking about this in some sense. And it wasn't the sense of coming up with some sense of right or wrong or definitive judgment on the issue, but it was just talking about it and having a dialogue for that, which was the point of this play in the first place that I had heard, so that's why I wanted to be involved.
Well, even beyond, certainly just the particular point of interest of the show and the topic is of personal interest enough that I was intrigued. But I think even beyond just general interest, it was the notion of being part of a theater piece, being working as an actor in something that mattered more beyond just a performance or entertainment thing. That actually was the opportunity to give a voice to people that might not have had that, and be able to bring that to an audience and perform that. And just as no matter what the topic, just the notion of doing a performance that could provoke thought and change and dialogue and emotions beyond just an entertainment value to an audience, that was a very exciting aspect for me from the beginning.
I feel the same way, that it was it was a wonderful opportunity to be involved in something, a project that could matter, that could really reach out. And it also just felt like the right time. It felt like people maybe were tired of the polarization of it, and so it felt like, this could be very exciting, and I wanted to be part of that momentum.
I think for me, I remember when I first started hearing whispers about this project, and I went to Stephanie and banged down the door and begged her to let me be a part of it, because it's such a personal issue that just affects my family and how I relate to them and my friends, and it's such an integral part of my story, and I had to be a part. I just knew I had to be a part of it, and I was so nervous when I went to talk to you for the first time about it. I was like, please, I'll wash the floors. I don't care. Whatever you want me to do, I just have to be there for this. And
So she washed the floor.
I did wash the floors, yes.
Yeah, I remember that when Stephanie called me and offered me to come and work on this. It was totally that cliche thing where I'm on the phone, yes, that sounds great. I'd love to do that. But outside. Yes, Stephanie, I would really enjoy that. Thank you.
See, I really didn't. I'm one of those. I really didn't want to be a part of it. I'm thinking the thought of working a whole summer on something, and I'm kind of lazy. But then I kind of feel the same way as Kaylin and Jean, that the opportunity to work on something totally brand new, a world premiere, and then when I got to know more about what this was all about, I was very excited about the prospects of being involved with it.
And something so organic too. I think that was one of the most exciting things about it, was that I think I had chances to kind of work on shorter ethnographies before, but to do a full length, and just have it be such an organic process with 10 devisers in a room for a summer basically, doing something. It's just an exciting opportunity and an issue that we're all pretty passionate about, obviously.
For me, it was a part of our main stage, season at my university, and at first I was just like, this is a deep topic. This is something you don't really hear about, like gay and Christian. Like I just don't hear about that, and so, I got the part, and I was very excited but nervous at the same time, and it just opened my eyes because there's so much research and there's just so much you don't know, and it just makes me completely open-minded about just so many things on a spiritual aspect and on like a sexuality aspect. So it was a great positive experience for me.
Describe what the collaborative process was like of devising this piece and putting this piece together. What was it like to put it together?
You don't remember.
Horrendously painful.
Daunting.
Let us refresh your memory.
Daunting is a good word to start with. It was
Definitely, when we first, got together, like that giant document that was all of the transcribed interviews together, it was however, close to
700 pages?
It was a long,
10
it was
hours
huge.
long.
Took us
12
you know,
hours.
12 hours, sorry.
12
12
hours to read it.
You're talking
through.
the first reading?
Yeah,
Yeah.
first initial reading.
Well,
we
even
got all
before
material.
that was the actual transcribing of the interviews.
Yeah.
which-
Right.
Before that was research.
And before that,
And doing the interviews.
Maybe you should start at the beginning.
So, yeah,
I'm only concerned about when I joined.
we did like 4 months of research, of reading a bunch of different materials and watching, just reading, absorbing as much as we could, dialoguing about it, which got really intense, I think, a lot of the time, because we were from divergent viewpoints, even though it probably doesn't necessarily seem that way. But so it was interesting to kind of hammer out a lot of the theological issues and just get on the same page theologically about what these 7 passages are and what the various interpretations are. And so that was really the initial stage.
I think like in those early stages too, like when we were meeting and just talking, I think one of the really powerful parts for me, because the theology stuff was good for me, but when we started looking for images and trying to see what these issues kind of look like when, in a visual form, like that was a really powerful part of the beginning stages for me to kind of see, and for us to each, like, because we are so different, like, and when we were asked to bring in different images of how we saw these different elements coming together, we all had such different things to show each other, and that was a really powerful part for me.
I think the hard part for me was we all felt very strongly about this issue, and so there was a lot of discussion, but really wanted to keep it as much a piece that did not have an agenda so that the audience had a role in coming to their own conclusions.
That was like a
and
four or
was
5
hard.
month long process
Yeah.
of hashing that out.
Well, I love that the way that it condensed, like that it begins on these these huge kind of broad ideological or theological discussions. I mean, these huge, like deep, dense topics, and then through the process, so we're kind of debating and talking about that and coming from different perspectives, and then when it gets down to the actual script writing, we're having equally as intense discussions over like a single word, whether or not that's the word belongs. Just the condensation of that that kind of the relationship that we all had of deciding what was the best way to voice these things, and it can go from such broad topics to such tiny little, what would have seemed like mincing from at the very beginning, and it became so important by the end of choosing singular words and movements that were so focused at the end.
It felt like we were taking a seminar in a way. The books that you had us read and respond to, these great historical perspectives that I felt like I learned so much that I didn't know coming into it. And then with that sort of background, then dealing with these personal stories and to see how they interweave was just that was an amazing process, I think.
And also in the beginning stages, and you talked about a lot of debate that we had and stuff, I feel like we kind of had to, as a devising team, we had to learn how to argue with each other and still be gracious and still be graceful and be able to be respectful of each other at the same time. And that's hard to do. Because we're human beings, we're passionate, we're emotional, we want to lash out about things and stuff. And so, we hurt each other's feelings a lot, and we had spiritual breakdowns. And
Right, and we eventually had to set up like ground rules for the
we
table.
had to set up ground rules for for that. And it's funny because looking back at that, we sort of had to learn how to argue and to approach each other with positions of respect, because that's what we wanted the play itself to do in the end, was be able to approach with a sense of grace and a sense of fostering dialogue and not judgment. And so it's interesting that we kind of had to go through that ourselves to learn how to do that with the play itself.
I think it's so interesting, even just among the group of us, there were so many. We all came to the project at different times and at different levels. I mean, Dave had been involved for a long time with you, almost from inception of doing some of the research and interviews from years ago. Mary Jane was there at the beginning of that, some of that too. And like Emily said, she had approached you months earlier. So we all kind of came at different stages to come together. Frank is a member of the second cast. Then after that work had done, Frank came in. So we all the people here kind of span years of entering and imparting their their piece onto the project.
Yeah, Frank, what's it like for you to come into this process as, not, as the second cast and be part of, what this whole group has gone through, to inherit what this group did?
I mean, I don't know, I feel like I'm a part of like such a huge like project, and like you guys put so much work in it, and it's like an honor to like just sit amongst you guys, no, seriously, no, stop, I'm serious, no, because, keep going, like, I mean, I can't sit and read a play for an hour, for 12 hours, I can't, like, you guys did so much research, and you guys had valid points in the show. It's so amazing that you guys put so much work and so much of your heart into such a project, and for me to just come in and just be a part of the cast, it's amazing, because, I mean, I did as much as I could, but I can't even imagine doing as much as you guys did.
I think we're all just glad it made sense to other people.
Well, just to go back to what we were saying at the beginning, after we had all these debates and theological discussions and everything, then we accrued all of these, when it ended up being 127 interviews, all of this material, and we compiled this huge document of all the stories that we thought, okay, these are really good. This is what we should be considering. And that was the document that ended up being a 12-hour regroup.
That was the first draft of the play. Was
right.
12
So
hours.
we had no structure whatsoever. So we had to figure out that process of what the structure of this piece was going to look like. And it sounds obvious in retrospect, but finally we came to the conclusion of using the actual 7 passages and extrapolating like a thematic concept from each one that would allow us to kind of have a hub to circle the stories around and start having certain stories gravitate towards each of these 7 points. And there's a lot of shifting that happened after we established that, but it at least gave us a framework.
And I just want to,
Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say that the food really mirrored that whole process, because it started out with full dinners. By the end, it was just crumbs or chips, but worth it.
We were living on Triscuits, but
Because we got into this for the food, really.
Can you guys describe what those themes are that we came up with for each of the 7 passages, and how
Where's our
My
script?
script.
how the passages relate to the stories? Can you talk about
the
that?
first time I remember you talking about that was specifically related to the Sodom story. When
Sodom and Gomorrah
the Sodom and Gomorrah story in Genesis, that was such a, in doing all the research and learning about all the ideas of hospitality in that. And then, so the first time that I remember discussing that or hearing you talk about that idea of using that notion of hospitality as a vehicle for coming out stories and for people's reception from families and from public when they had a coming out experience, and the hospitality or inhospitality that they received from that. And so when you first talked about that, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's that's a connector. That means that's actually something that is lucid and obvious, and I think makes a connection, and it's the way that you can reach out to an audience.
And related to Sodom and Gomorrah is the passage in Jude, the really obscure small passage, and that's which uses, in many translations, uses the phrase "strange flesh," and so that immediately kind of we started thinking well, there's a lot of people who, when they're coming to grips with the coming out process, feel like they're in strange flesh.
Don't
they
feel
don't
comfortable.
understand what's happening, or they do, or there's this reconciliation process. So, so that took the first kind of the pole position in the script, and then the hospitality, and then it kind of snowballed out of that, trying to figure out how the rest
It
of
kind
them
of
played.
became almost chronological in certain ways of the
Yeah,
flow
the
of people's stories.
Yeah,
from
right, of the
first-
pro- I mean, it almost always starts with, well, when I first realized that I was different in some way, or that I had these feelings, was this, and so it made sense to start with the Jude passage that he kind of spoke to that.
Although we did have, at one point, I think, the creation story at the beginning and then moved
Yeah.
it to the
Oh,
end,
yeah.
which I kind of liked, that idea of creation of something family or something new happening at the end, which kind of emotionally
New
launched it
beginnings,
out to open up dialogue. And
Through it, so we had Jude, and then the Sodom and Gomorrah story, and then
Leviticus.
Yeah, Leviticus was third.
I think everyone who, in the interviews, who talked about that was just always, you talk about the Leviticus passages about, that are so clear and direct. It's, you shall not lie and all that. But almost everyone who talked about that, their reaction to those passages was just like, okay,
Yeah.
that's there. I don't know what
Like,
we
that would
still,
put Red Lobster
Yeah.
out of business.
Well, Leviticus has all the stuff with the holiness code, right, and the sense of
Right.
of a tribe, a culture that was trying to survive, and so
and rules for that survival in the how it worked within that community.
right. So we started to see it as sort of a framework of initial attempts to survive. The revelation of one's own sexuality and what that meant for them, and so kind of surviving the initial stages of
Right, which made sense too, because that was the therapy stories were in that section, right? Of
Yeah.
people, of
There-
people going to reparative therapy to try
Reparative
and
therapy.
heal themselves of this, viewing it as a sickness, as a disease. Yeah.
And then it's Timothy Corinthians after that, right?
Yep.
Or-
No, Romans.
Romans, sorry.
Yeah, Romans.
Which brings up the Romans passage is the one that, from where all the love the sin or hate the sin and the nature, natural and unnatural
Oh, right.
language comes in the translation. So that became. And I was just, even for people who didn't, interviewees who weren't directly familiar with, with the passages or with the translations or with languages, I was amazed how often that language came up. About feeling unnatural, or this feels natural, but it's supposed to be unnatural. But that language is so kind of ingrained and embedded in the culture so much that this is an unnatural
It's what people
thing.
were raised on. It's what you hear in Sunday school. It's what you were brought up in church, and your family is just that constant affirmation of
media.
natural, right?
But definitely more so than the other passages. That's the one in Romans is where
Yeah.
that really stems from, and that's where that
It's New
that
Testament,
Pauline
baby.
language there in the New Testament is where a lot of that
Yeah.
comes from. So we use that as a springboard then to talk about people's stories of being kind of feeling how to become comfortable with themselves and how they were attempting to.
And
Negotiate that.
a lot of my friends who were homosexual and Christian, I remember hearing a lot of them say, if this is so wrong, then God, why did you make me this way? And so that kind of goes along with that feeling unnatural, and what felt natural was not supposed to be.
And is that where we started talking about practicing? What does it mean to be a practicing homosexual? I'm going to
You're
homosexual
getting better
practice.
and better and better at that.
If you want to do it right, yeah.
How to practice.
well,
And
that
then
was,
after that, go ahead, Jean.
well, I was just going to say that was the great thing about the discussions is that it's really discussion about language and the power of language and how we sort of take it for granted or how it can be used and abused. And I mean that was really the powerfulness of
It really is amazing
the language.
how such a broad,
Yeah.
intense topic that people hold so close with such passion is so semantic at its essence. It's really fascinating to see how much that tweaks of interpretation or tweaks of language
Right.
means so much, and people hold on to those words so strongly. And we saw in the interviews the personal effect of that has on people who, with
Right.
this language and these words and the semantics of these passages,
Right.
just are deeply embedded. And
I remember being really surprised to hear that the 7 passages were referred to as the 7 clobber passages, and I thought, yeah, that's what it is. These language
people
being used as a stick.
Right, as a
know.
means for oppression.
Yeah.
that layering of progressive ideas and modern ideas onto these ancient texts was, and how, I mean, it's not a new thing. It's not like there was invented by any translators this century. That's been, people have been interpreting and changing that language for millennia now.
Apart from the 7 passages, then, the process of deciding what stories was so difficult. And I think you, Stephanie, you were the one who said at the beginning, we really need sort of a central figure to kind of lead us through this. And so the Jim Lucas character is that sort of central narrator. And then we have, you know, other stories to hang on these 7 ideas. But really the process of figuring out those stories, which stories or which parts of stories to go and which to stay, was so torturous because they were all beautiful, wonderful, touching, funny, everything, and it was very hard. We probably said, well, we've got about 3 or 4 different scripts in here.
Absolutely.
And we probably spent just as much time mourning the cuts that we had made as we
Call it
did
embrace
research.
the cut. Embrace the cut.
Yeah, embrace the cut became our motto.
That's right.
That was extremely difficult. That was, I mean, and it's just like each one of these interviews is like a whole universe, is a whole story, is a whole history of someone's life, and it's just, it was really hard to not be able to honor that. And
We
not be
wanted to
able
treat it as sacred.
Right,
material, too,
right,
that these
right.
are
I think it was Morgan who said at some point along the way something that was really, I thought was really beautiful.
Leave it aside.
What?
We'd all like to hear that.
Was that we weren't really, I mean, it's not like we were cutting the stories per se, we were carrying the stories with us and they were
Yes,
informing
they were
what we were
informing what
doing.
we were
Right.
So it really was, I mean, just being able to hear the stories, observe the stories, talk about the stories.
Still in there somewhere.
Right,
Right.
they still were infused in there somehow.
You sure Morgan said that?
those. Well,
Yeah, he did
I
say
think.
I imagine him saying that.
Well, what,
Timothy Corinthians.
what I always said was that these stories became our stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That even though I have not lived the same experience as these people's stories that I'm reading, these became so meaningful to me. They became my own story. Like I related to them so much. I took them with me.
And I think that's the crux of the play too, is to see that, you know, to bridge that gap of like, just because you're straight and just because I'm gay, you know, we are human, and like, and I think that was part of our process too, is finding a way to identify with these people who come from such different places in their lives and have had such different experiences, but realizing that we all have threads where we connect. And
And I think that's why one of the most moving spots for me was the very end of the play when the names came up.
Oh, my
We're
God.
clapping, and we talked about that later, that I think that was true for most of us to see those names. Many of the stories were in the play, some of them we were carrying with us, but that was
Very
Yeah.
very powerful.
Do we want to talk about Timothy?
Timothy Corinthians. So the next section.
I didn't realize that actually made it into the show.
It did, in fact. It was the longest section. Well, so all about so oppression was the next step.
Well, Timothy Corinthians is all about 2 key words and the way that they've been translated, Malakos and Arsenokoitai, because those are the 2 words in question that have been translated as homosexual or practicing homosexual or things like that. And so there was a lot of talk about use and abuse of scripture, use and abuse of translation. So it largely became a section in the play about abuse in its many different forms, self-abuse or church kind of don't ask, don't tell kind of situations.
Or blatant oppression from the church.
Blatant oppression, yeah, too. So
That section of the play certainly became one of the more intense and difficult. You know, to spending a whole afternoon or evening reading through those stories or trying to learn that stuff was difficult. It's really hard to go through those, you know, stories where people have been so deeply wounded by their experience and the way they've been treated, and the way they reacted to that was painful. To you know, like Morgan said before, just to you can only do that for so long before it really, you know, becomes personal to you, or you feel as if it's happening to you. When you spend months reading these people's stories, you feel the hurt as if it were happening to you eventually.
Yeah, I agree with that. The long monologue I had of Jim Lucas being,
Cast out.
cast out of his church
Yeah.
was just one of the most emotional parts for me in the whole show, was that whole section. So yeah, I agree with that.
That's where I like personally separate acting from telling somebody's story. And like every time I would do the show, I didn't feel like I was acting. I was just like, you know, these people opened up their hearts, and like, I can only do so much to, you know, tell their story where it's just, I'm not acting anymore. Like, I'm just trying to be honest with it.
Very true.
Absolutely.
And then we ended with creation, which we talked about a little bit.
The sense of partnership or lack of partnership, the sense of celibacy, and that being a viable option for some people. So yeah, I think it was.
Well, and I
Well,
think
I mean, the argument, sorry, Morgan, the argument that would go for the creation story as some kind of anti-homosexual rhetoric is that it talks about the creation of man and woman for each other, and that's the interpretation that leads that. So it was our taking that story and really looking at it and saying, well, at the notion of the healthiest way for humans to exist is in partnership and in relationship with each other, be it sexual or not, but just community and somehow and have that relationship. So using that as kind of the ideal that we're hoping people could see to work towards is no matter what you think politically or theologically about the issue, that these people deserve the community and deserve to have relationships.
Well, and we wanted to end, I think we wanted the last section to be a positive.
Hope.
Something that's filled with hope. And like Gene said, to take the creation story and move that to the end, the sense of newness, the sense of creating something new. And it's really easy for when I first sort of started talking about the issue, I guess, from Christian circles, it was really easy to say, well, if you're homosexual, you're just meant to be celibate. Like, that's just kind of what it is. And so I think when we were first addressing this, we were like, well, we don't want that to be the message. But at the same time, we have interviews with people who did choose to be celibate, and that they found that to be a very powerful choice. And so we wanted to represent that too. So I thought it was really, I always thought it was very powerful to have the couple at the end and the person who chose to be celibate at the end, and it just brought about. We wanted to bring about a lot of hope with the end of it.
It was definitely one of the sections that where, like Mary Jane talked about before, about trying to not make it an agenda-driven piece. That was one of the difficult ones almost.
Yeah,
making
it was.
that, being able to tell those stories and try to have it be hopeful in terms of these people can live full lives but not trying to have audience walk out thinking that we all want them to go vote for gay marriage. I mean, but that's one, that not to be the point. Finding that balance was a difficult piece in that.
What do you think is the most difficult challenge that you either faced as a group or on your own in producing this project? What was the hardest thing about creating this?
Finding the balance.
Yeah.
I think finding the balance of being true to the demographics that we interviewed, and we really tried to get as wide of a demographic as we possibly could, and not creating an agenda-driven piece was difficult, I think, no matter how hard we tried.
But we always wanted to. This was something you said that I found very powerful. But always focusing on fostering dialogue, and the only way to foster dialogue is to create empathy, is to create and not drive people away. And that was really hard to not have it look like we had an agenda, even though we really didn't. We always wanted to make it not seem that we had an agenda. We didn't want to have an agenda. We wanted to come at this from both sides and have it be open and honest, and just to create empathy and create dialogue. So but that's hard to do.
I think for me it was, this is such a volatile topic for people that as soon as they found out I was involved in the project, then the expressions and emotions and kinds of conversations I got into, and people wanting to be heard, and it became very personal for me, for them, about how people felt and how the church felt, and it just opened up floodgates in terms of conversations that I'd never had with people before.
Which is both good but difficult.
Yeah. Well, you must think this
Right.
if you're part of that.
But I think we certainly all have that experience where even just when you say the title of the playlist, I'm working on 7 passages, the stories of gay Christians. I imagine we all have the thing where it says gay Christians.
Yeah.
I didn't think that existed.
Yeah, I didn't think that was possible.
That's almost what I said for what made you want to be involved in this. I just wanted people to hear gay Christians. Because
In a title.
it's unreal how many people will say, what? What's that?
But, so no matter what your belief is, no matter where you fall politically or theologically there was a big part of this is just acknowledging that these people do exist and identify as
And in West
themselves
Michigan.
and can't be ignored.
And hey, they're real people, and you hear their stories, and it's like they're normal people. These are people that you would hang out with.
And then I think, too, to be true to the pain of the experience, but bring hope and stay, allow the audience to engage. I think all of that was really some tough tensions there. So.
I was just going to say that I think, like, I never heard that, like the concept of gay Christians, that's not even possible. Is that possible? I've never heard rhetoric like that personally. And for me, it's been more a matter of, my experience with the church is that they haven't dealt with sexuality really much at all. So I just haven't heard it addressed at all. And so for me, I think a lot of the challenge was also in finding an audience for this piece, because we definitely didn't want to just preach to the choir with this. And we knew from day one that was going to be a difficulty, a huge difficulty, because the people that we were going to come to this, the people that would be propelled to go to something like this, probably have already been thinking about it, or were already a little bit more leaning. And I don't know. It just seemed like finding an audience that
Well, and
was
that's-
really inviting
that's-
dialogue with people who didn't agree with us,
Right.
or with what this piece is trying to do of getting a dialogue started.
Yeah, well, and I think that's one of the most beautiful things about this process to me is talking with people later, afterwards, and with friends and things. People came back multiple times, and every time the people that I talked to that came back, they brought their parents, they brought their family members, because they needed their families to see this. And I think that was one of the coolest things I heard afterwards when, like, I know someone who saw it like 6 times, and each time she came back, she always made sure she brought somebody she knew needed to see this play. And not somebody who's like, oh, there's this cool play, you should come see it. No, this person needs to see this. And that, like, and I'm sure we've all heard instances of that.
Oh my
like,
gosh,
Well,
I
that's why
went
the
down to
film's
see the
being-
Western Michigan, see your show, and random people that saw our show just
Oh, yeah.
multiple
CDM,
times.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal.
It's funny. I think we talk about balance as as a driving force in this, and I think that kind of crosses a lot of different ideas actually. And like not only was our struggle to find balance within the stories and balance on stage and the ideas, but I think it works as a nice metaphor for the people. Like I think finding a balance is what most of these people interviewed would say they're attempting to do, and find their own balance. And just thinking scripturally too, is that was our same struggle as to how can you highlight and accentuate some of the translation issues and semantic issues within the scriptures, but still maintain that these are sacred texts, and find that balance of saying we're not criticizing or trying to negate these in any way, and trying to find that balance of where you can still believe in both these ideas. I think one of my favorite pieces for in the show, in that regard of balance, is the Damon character, who Morgan played on stage and who Frank plays in the movie and in the second production, where he has that single piece where Damon talks about, kind of puts on his airs about not caring. He's like, I don't, people can think whatever they want of me, I'm me, and I don't care about, it's fine, I'm me and I'm strong and I don't care. And then almost immediately says, no, I still have not come out to my church, and still
I'm
don't.
still
He's
scared.
still scared. And just the struggle of people to find that balance of how how to exist with these two things. And so I think balance is just a great metaphor for the whole project overall, with the stories and our process of putting it together, and the scriptural debate and everything is just, it's finding balance and not coming down 100% guaranteed on any side, and just letting it all, letting people try to find a balance for themselves.
And I think too, like after seeing this second production at the college at Western, one thing that kind of came up was that when they had, I think, a theater respondent come in and respond critically to the production, was that he didn't necessarily get a sense of this, why being a Christian was so important to these people, why the church was their home, and why that was so near and dear to them. And I think that's something that it was a difficult balance for us to find, and I don't know if we found it, to be honest.
That might
So,
be a question that's still there.
yeah, exactly. I feel like that's something that maybe it could be treated more in the production and the way the production is done. I don't know, but I don't know if it's inherent in the script. So maybe, I mean,
I think I enjoy that ambiguity of it. They kind of against
As-
all odds, without reason, these people believe because it's what they want to, because they feel a connection to that faith when they have plenty of reason to shun it and
Well,
push it away.
as a Christian though, like that is like, oh, that is why I'm here. Like, I totally hear you on that. Like, I feel like that is something to consider in the future and how we do it. But like as a Christian, like, yeah, that love is so important to me to convey. I think, because I mean, like being gay, like that's half of it. That's half. The other half, or even less than half. But I think for a lot of the people we interviewed, not for everybody, but for a lot of the people we interviewed, like, ooh, that's what keeps you going. That's what gets you out of the bed in the morning. And, and I think that's a really crucial part.
That's
I
the
don't
first
know.
thing they would describe themselves.
Yeah,
a lot of people
that's-
said
yeah,
that. They'd say, first I'm a Christian, and then I'm this, and gay is somewhere on that list, but Christian is first and foremost. And I think we did a good job of trying to navigate putting that forward. But
I would agree with you. I think that.
But as far as the reasons for staying Christian,
I
or just
think
the
maybe-
reasons of why it's so important.
Well, it was so, finding the balance of this piece is so difficult in telling all these people's stories, and we just didn't have, it didn't always fit in the way that we were, the way that this flowed, the way that it, but I don't know. I mean, that's one of the things that I'm excited about this piece is that since we created it, we can always change it. Add, pull.
Well, and hopefully that's what people will dialogue about after
Exactly,
seeing
yeah.
it.
That's-
is where faith does fit into
Right,
this and how.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, and I always thought it would be interesting to see like a production of this in New York or someplace like that, and I would bet, or London, or England. We'll say England.
Cross our fingers.
Hopefully. But it would be interesting to see audience reaction, because I wonder if people would be more offended by the spirituality or the religious aspect of it more so than the homosexuality. Because while this is a play that obviously the big topic is homosexuality, it's also probably the most religious play I've ever been a part of. And not only that, but the most spiritual. It's doing this play was a spiritual experience for me. Which I've never. I've had maybe close in some other plays that I've been a part of, but it was a spiritual experience.
There's certainly a threat too that in some other kind of community, obviously West Michigan is pretty Christian reformed, and there's a lot of this influence, and I'm pretty sure, is that the church? But there's a threat. Not a threat. That's a strong word, but there's a risk that in another community or another state or whatever country, that it would almost come across like I could hear somebody saying, why are you only dealing with the oppression that Christian gay people feel?
Sure.
Like, because all gay people feel oppression. Right. So why are you only dealing with this? And I could see that, and I've thought about that too. If this went to New York or London.
Tell me about Tell me about how some of the characters that you played and how they altered the way you saw things or how you related to the character, like some of the powerful experiences you had with. So if you can name the character and then talk about what it was like to play them and go through some of the issues that they had to deal with.
Anonymous Woman 8. I didn't know much about her. We only just got a little bit of information, and it was, the lines made it very hard to tell if she was sort of
not right. It was just bad.
kind of poking fun at herself, or if it was just such deep pain, but that she went to such lengths to try to prove to herself and to other people that she wasn't gay. So yes, I slept with these people, and yes, I went on these dates, and I tried and I tried and I tried and I tried and I tried, and like, who was she trying for, and what did that do to her soul and her sense of self to be working so hard to try to prove to herself and other people that she wasn't, and then in the end, it's like, this is who I am. I thought, and in a very short amount of time, she takes you through that whole arc of her story.
I was going to say, I think for me, it was the anonymous Ben character who was seen in silhouette in the film, and well, it's on the stage version, where this is a man who could never, in my mind, could never be happy with who he was living a life that he felt he had to live because of his beliefs. I was so emotionally drawn to that this was a person that could never truly be himself. And I felt so much empathy for him. I mean, he really, in a very short period of time, was really, I think was one of the more powerful people's stories that we portrayed.
And I think like that whole group, like Amanda, for me, like the characters that are trying to be straight, who are trying to be in a relationship, trying to be married, and live that life with this, like, I mean, in a heterosexual marriage, right? And I mean, to live that day in, day out, and to be trying to grasp for things to hold on to, like, I can't imagine what that would be like. And, you know, Amanda, that was Amanda for me, to, you know, be at Barnes & Noble and buying sex books on your honeymoon. I mean, that's heartbreaking. Like, it's heartbreaking. And
But can you tell her story, the hopefulness of her starting out as an anonymous? You know, like,
It's one of
Sure.
my favorite things that has happened within this process now.
Yeah. This character, do you remember what anonymous number she
16.
was? 16. 16. Right. Anonymous woman 16, you know, we blocked it and learned the lines and had her interview and everything. And then after one of the performances, she introduced herself to me, and like meeting somebody that's interviewed, it's always like meeting a movie star for me. Just like, oh my gosh, it's somebody who's interviewed. And she, after seeing the production, and I think this was after the production had closed, she has decided to, you know, she said, I want you to use my name. Like, and she is, I feel like, I mean, I haven't talked to her and I don't really know her all that well, but she is beginning to reclaim her identity and to know that, you know, that whatever this process did for her, whatever this play did for her, is bringing healing to people in whatever small form, and bringing a sense of identity back, and bringing a sense of, you know, I can stand before God, and I can, you know, live this way, or whatever, you know, I can be me and love God. And
with
yeah.
her, with her, it's interesting because it's not that she wants to live. She doesn't want to be in a homosexual relationship. She's in a heterosexual marriage. She just wants to be honest. Like, she just wants people to know that, like, this is who I am. She doesn't necessarily want answers of what she's supposed to do. And I think that that's just really powerful. And it's been such a hard thing for her to be open about that. And so it's
honesty,
it's incredible
it's just that
to be
honesty, right?
just to be able to say, this is
My
who I
story,
am. This
and
is how I was
right.
made, and this is what.
I can't think of a better compliment to this project than that. I mean, is that not the ultimate goal of this project, is to take away anonymity, of this, to give voice to the stories, and that's to have a direct example of someone who was anonymous and kind of hiding and secretive about this, who through the course, you know, through her own experience of seeing her story performed, you know, has taken away the anonymity and is herself. I think that's terrific.
And I was in an unusual position in that I knew personally all of the people that I played in the play, which was interesting. But I mean, and like I felt I don't know. I felt very comfortable doing these stories because I knew all these people personally, and it was very easy to I don't know, convey the love that I have for them because I knew them all personally. And I think that Frank and I will probably have similar experiences in that Damon was it was very, very near and dear to my heart. Playing his story was very meaningful for me personally, as Damon was a very close friend of mine, and his story is not only really funny, but he has such a wonderful way of telling his relationship with his dad is such a powerful thing, and I connect very emotionally with my dad as well, and so I don't know. It was very powerful telling those stories for me. I'm very touched by Damon's story and playing him.
I agree with, like, yeah, Damon was one of my characters that you can do Damon? Okay, I'm gonna do it. You know, like, it was no problem. But, like, and then I think it was hard for me because, like, I mean, obviously I didn't know any of my characters coming into this. And then two of my characters right here, you know, they would come to the show and it's just like, okay, Frank, you have to do this, you know, concentrate. And then I would look at them in the audience and I start stuttering on stage. Like, it was so embarrassing. But at the same time, it's like, okay, okay, I need to do this, and you know, I did a lot of work, and this is an honor, you know, they're here, let me just justify their story and, you know, connect with them and just flow with it. And it was just so much fun. Like, I find that, like, one of my characters are here, I'm like, okay, let's do it, I'm excited, you know? And I don't know, it was hard to, you know, grasp these people. I'm not gonna say characters anymore, I'm sorry, but it was hard to, you know, grasp these people. And like, you know, I played 5 different characters and, you know, thinking how I'm gonna change this up a little bit. And after a while, it wasn't about how I'm going to change this up. It's how I'm going to just tell this story and just you know, make them happy that I'm allowing myself to tell their story.
Yeah, and well, you poor thing, because for me, when I played the same 5 characters, 2 were involved in the production, or one was in the cast with me. And me and Dave go way back, so I was able to just tell him, I'm going to play you this way. And that's I'm just kidding, actually. And so 2 were involved in that, and the other 3 I don't think ever came, or weren't able to ever make it to the play. So pressure was off for me. The 2, I mean, these 2 knew how badly I played them right off the bat. So the other 3 never know. So.
I don't know. Meaning,
I know. So you had the pressure of having that.
Being able to bring Jim Lucas. When I first met him, I'm going, oh my God, this guy is so cool. When I first met him, but
hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
doing Jim Lucas, being able to, I mean, for me, I grew up as a Baptist. So I had a lot of this. Of course, back then, homosexuality wasn't even really talked about. So, being able to do Jim Lucas and bring his story to the table, I learned so much more about the Scripture. Because I just really appreciated the way he felt about the whole subject, and I think he is so articulate about the way that he feels about the Scripture and about his place in the community, and how he helps a lot of people, a lot of gay Christians. So it was truly an honor for me to be able to bring his words to life. And then Randy Wyatt, I've known Randy a lot of years. That guy is a real character. I mean, truly a character. And I always kind of considered him to be kind of the comedy relief of the production with the way he is. But able to see him after the show and how appreciative they were of the honesty that we were able to bring to their stories meant more to me than anything. Okay, then all right, then that means that we got it right, that we were able to actually bring their words to the masses that saw it, and hopefully we'll see the DVD, and be true to them, and that felt really, really good. A little plug for the DVD there. Just a little plug.
I feel the same way in terms of when I met Marilyn and Lauren, who MJ and I played, and they just seemed so grateful and sort of humble in a way that I thought, oh no, it's really the other way around. You're allowing your stories, placing them in our hands and allowing yourself to be so vulnerable. What a gift that is, and that was a very moving thing to meet them after one of the performances, and to here they are thanking us, and just felt no, it's really the other way around. You've been very brave about this, because these people who have been carrying around a lot of pain and unresolved, and willing to let that be out in the public, it just seems just a very brave thing.
Well, I hated it when Stephanie would come back to the dressing room and say, "Hey, guess who's in the audience tonight?" Don't tell me that.
And it really was like meeting a movie star. I remember with Randy. Oh my gosh. When he first showed, I had met him I think once before he came to like the preview performance, and I met him and I was like, it was weird because I felt like I knew him so well. Like we had this rapport or whatever. This was like the second time he ever met me though, so it was like, I don't know what to say.
Well, especially when
It's
you
like
sit-
meeting a celebrity when you.
when you transcribe and spend hours and hours
Yeah.
to interview them and hear their whole
Yeah.
story, sit in their shoes for a little bit and sit in their house and interview them and then transcribe for hours
into
and
their
hours
house
and
and-
hours. It really do feel like you know
things.
them already. It's a very weird, one-sided
Yeah.
thing.
Really is.
Because I'd meet people and be like, I really am moved by your story. And they're like,
Excuse me, who are you?
there you are, I have no idea who you are. I'd see them at the farmer's market and be like, oh, I probably shouldn't say anything. That'd be weird.
I love your couch.
I felt really blessed to be able to play three really different people. One who was celibate, one who's in a committed relationship, and one who is really struggling to this day, has been struggling his whole life, and has gone through Jim F., who has gone through some of the worst self-abuse I've ever heard. So it was really interesting to try and live in all three of those different shoes for a while. It was really a powerful experience.
The one, this is kind of backtracking a bit, but the Anonymous Man 12 I played has, and actually this is a bit that ended up not being in the stage, but it is in the, that we did film, one of those little pieces we got to put back in, where he talks about being confronted by a kid at a camp he was counseling at, and this kid is was struggling with his own sexuality and comes to Man 12 and says, I think you can help me with this because of and his kind of terror at that, being this kid knows about me, and he wasn't out at all. It's just, still not. So that, and throughout the story, he talks about trying to, to play straight, to be that he can't let anyone know this, and if people can tell this about me, this is this horrible thing, and and having met him a little bit, I know a few other people here know him, this guy pretty well, and so when he talks about going through long periods where he would intentionally try to objectify women in public, or swear, or be profane in ways to attempt to kind of fit this more macho image, so people wouldn't think that he was homosexual. And then to meet this guy, it was like the sweetest, most just kind of nice, intelligent, articulate guy. To imagine him forcing himself into that, into being a vulgar, sexist kind of a person purely to try and fit this cultural image was, that when first reading that story and then playing his story, that's something that really spoke to me a bit about. I can't imagine having to, we all certainly put on different errors and like to play up different aspects of ourselves in different company, but to have to go that far with it, to genuinely have to try and create a different persona for yourself so people wouldn't know who you really were, was a really powerful image to me.
Can you guys talk about stories that you've heard about how people were changed by this production? What's the best story you heard about somebody being changed or altered or coming to terms with themselves or something happening in their family?
The one story that I still can't even really believe, because it seemed like it was such a Lifetime movie moment, but it was so amazing, was right out in the lobby, there was a woman who was in her 90s, I think, who was sitting on a bench with a walker kind of a thing, and she grabbed I was just standing there talking to somebody else, and she grabbed my hand and said that she was so grateful that she's lived long enough to see this, to see something like this, which I can't say anything about that.
A friend of mine. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm looking at Stephen. We're both kind of.
I know.
I'm thinking about the guy that was in the back during the talk back the one time. That it was younger. He was in college. I think he was from Holland or something, and had come to see this, and just kind of stood up and he was like, "I don't really have a question, but I've always felt alone my entire life, and this is the first time that I don't feel like I'm alone in this." And that was both those moments. Well, I only heard about that moment, but both those moments are just like.
Well, I think because we did talkbacks after every single production of this on the stage, piggybacking on what you said, the people that would share their stories and how they felt about seeing this show, I just was goosebumps, from people's reactions to it in a positive way. The talkbacks I thought were so important, because I think for a lot of people it was very therapeutic. They had to talk about how the play affected them. And I just think a lot of the people that shared how they felt was just wow.
Okay, I'm going to be really greedy and take this moment. So,
It's yours. We give
it's
it
mine.
to you.
No, not this moment. No, this memory. I'm being greedy and taking this.
Oh,
one.
it's yours.
Yeah.
You can-
We had, we've heard all about the process and all of this, and we'd been working on this for months, and I personally had no idea how people were going to take this. And of course, our first official performance was for a bunch of pastors and pastoral staff, and I was scared out of my mind. I was just so terrified because I love the church and I love my, the pastors I've had in my life. Like, these are people I respect and have, shown me the way. And so I was absolutely terrified. And of course, our first performance, and so we all get here and, we...
It's also at 10 a.m.?
10 in the morning. 10 in the
10
morning.
a.m. performance too. Correct.
And we're getting ready to go, and some of us have been, we tried and pray before the performances, and that was the only thing I was hoping would just kind of calm my pulse a little bit. And so we come out here, and we have no idea, or at least I had no idea how these people were going to react to this. And so we go through the show, and we get to the end, and we do our little prologue or epilogue, and we're out here, we're finishing, and and then the names come up, and that's like, and then they stood up. They stood up, and I.
And clapped and clapped.
And clapped. Not to leave. Not to leave.
like
No. Like
Standing
they,
ovation.
and just to. I mean, we all went
We all
back
lost
into.
it.
We all burst into tears.
We all lost
Stomach
it.
up in your throat.
I mean, because that's what we've been praying for and hoping for, and that was. I mean, not to demean any of the other performances, because I mean, of course, it did things for people, but I mean, this was what we did this play for, was for that audience.
They have so much power to change
They
the
had
dialogue.
exactly, and
Definitely seemed to set the tone for the rest of the run. I think we
Right.
just kind
Oh
of
yeah, that was unbelievable.
I mean, it was just like the fear and anticipation and all of these things. I mean, we were naked out there, just completely naked. I was half expecting.
Not literally.
I was half expecting
Well, maybe
people.
you guys were.
We didn't have shoes on.
I was half expecting people to walk out in the performance. I was expecting
Yeah.
people to, at some point during this run, somebody to get up and start yelling or something.
Even protest.
Yeah, protest or something. And
Well, the
I
performance.
guess I would build on that. I've been going to my church for 15 years, and it's a fairly conservative church. Never heard this talked about. And so many church members came to this, and both my pastors came. The second one didn't get tickets in time, and he's calling me, his wife's calling me, you've got to get us in, you've got to get it. I'm like, so I remember calling Mike, I'm like,
I gave
"Can
him the
you-"
one free seat next to me by the sound.
Yeah, I said it's going to be kind of loud, and that's okay. We just got to see it, and it's just. And since that point, people from my church have gotten together and had dinner together and talked, and people have come out, and it's unbelievable.
Tell me about what's personally changed in you as part of doing this piece. What actually changed in you?
I had thought that I had been in the most communal possible ensemble production ever before this, probably 3 times, and this definitely topped anything that I've ever been involved in. It was totally communal. It was like coming to church and having that fellowship, like every time I walked into this theater. And that was, I couldn't be more grateful for that. It was one of the best experiences of my entire life, and always will remain in my memory.
I think for me, I mean, I have a lot of gay and lesbian friends and acquaintances, and these kind of conversations about stuff like this would never come up. I am now no longer afraid to talk to them about these kind of things. I think that, you never want to talk about religion or things like that. I think it's, unless people bring it up, and I'm not afraid to talk to people about it anymore. I think that's probably the biggest change for me.
I think that when I first came on board with the project, I had the sort of mindset that, well, this will be a good project, a socially responsible thing to be involved in, and I'd already sort of made up my mind in certain aspects and realized my own prejudices in this. I come from a sort of liberal standpoint, and so there was a bit in me that was like, well, of course, well, you know, not really understanding the true struggles that people were going through to try to reconcile, you know, Christianity with their faith, and I mean with their sexuality. And so I thought, you know, why? Some part of me thought, why would you want to belong to an institution that doesn't want you? I mean, I had my own prejudices about the two ever reconciling in one way, and so I really had to think about it in a different way, and the process certainly helped me do that. But even more than that, I would say what happened in the process of embodying these characters, embodying their stories, is that I felt differently, and it felt to me like the sort of change of heart that has to happen before the change of mind can happen really was very powerful for me. Playing Anonymous Woman number 3, who, when you just read the sort of facts of her life, almost sound tabloid. How could these horrible things happen to her? But feeling what she must have gone through, and then the bravery that she had to say, you know, I felt that way too, and now I don't. Now I've had to face something new, something different. And that really feels to me like, well, that's just the process that you went through as well. You know, so if dialogue is really to open up, it has to open up from entrenched positions on both sides, even though sometimes the more liberal side likes to think it is right. Well, everybody, yes, and in some ways you can say that's true in terms of being more tolerant or open-minded, but I really think there's something for me that happened in terms of being more open-hearted that this process just fostered, and I am very grateful for that.
As Mike alluded to, I think all of us would just, in terms of the experience, it's an incredibly unique, you know, it's kind of a once in a lifetime kind of chance to have to work with a group of people that's work together so well, you know, even through the debates and the argument stuff, and like Morgan talked about earlier, having to learn how to argue and, you know, and to get our points across and our shared views. Through all that, to work collectively with a group of people to create a piece of responsible art with people who you enjoy and respect and admire so much as a collective is a unique experience and something that doesn't happen easily. And so I would imagine I can speak for us all and just say that I'd feel lucky to have been able to all to come together and do that. And certainly as just a more personal changing or effect, just the notion of socially responsible theater or socially responsible art has taken hold of me in a different way than I would have understood it before, and I have more of a drive or interest to continue this kind of work and, you know, different projects and in different ways. It's kind of, it's life altering to realize that you can have this kind of impact and effect on people, and the power that entails is great. It's an amazing experience, and I want to further it and keep doing more of it because of the strength of this experience.
I think for me, and to sort of build on what Greg said, the kinds of conversations I had with people completely changed. There were words that I never used with people. I mean, you just didn't broach the topic. I don't know, you didn't say the word homosexuality, or, I mean, at least in my circles, that wasn't really happening. And then one of the people while this whole process was happening, somebody I had known a very long time came out to me, and then I ended up interviewing her, and she came from a very conservative background. And then next thing I know, she went and told her parents, and just like her whole world changed, and she's fallen in love, and she's selling her house. She met somebody, and they're buying a house together, and it's like all in the space of time of, whenever this was, early last spring till now. But lots of conversations, and I guess putting a different face on it. For me, it seems like you would hear from more radical ends of the spectrum a lot, and I think what this play did and these conversations did is give it a very normal face.
For me, I guess the biggest change would be that, like I said before, that these stories became my story. And while I will always carry the experience of having done this play with me, I'll also always carry these stories with me.
I think the issue, it became far more than an issue for me. It became, piggybacking off what these two have said, it became a very domestic thing for me, and it served as an icebreaker, if nothing else, even just the topic that we were doing it, and that, but then if people came to see it, I find so many times in my life over the last, 5-10 years, where you want to talk about it, but it's like, I don't want to push this on people to talk about it. I don't know how to talk about it. It's just awkward. You don't just bring it up at the dinner table. The opportunities just don't present themselves a lot of the time. And so I'm just really grateful that this has served as an icebreaker for so many different conversations that probably otherwise wouldn't have happened. And even within my extended family, who I thought before this process, I thought I knew exactly where they stood and what they thought and what they had thought about and what they hadn't thought about. And I still don't know a lot of that, but I know a lot more than I did before this process started. It really has opened up a lot there. And it also has opened up for me on like a professional level, the concept, Stephanie, for you, with what your passion has done in creating this, and what this theater, Actors Theater, and Kyle, and Fred, and really Fred Sobalski, getting this going. When you have something that you're passionate about and you get the people behind it, it's amazing to me how many things, the donations, the donors we have, the people that are supporting this financially, just the amount of everything coming together has been unbelievable to me. It's been so much more than what we've created. It's been
Energy it's generated.
Exactly, yeah, because of the passion that started it, I think, and the people that were willing to stand behind it.
I think, just looking at the success of, not knowing how successful this piece was going to be, and it's become the #1 attended show in Actors Theater of Grand Rapids history, the most attended show ever.
It's almost 30 years.
In almost 30 years. It's just mind-boggling that
We weren't sure anyone would come.
It's not even a musical.
the time for this piece was now, and the timing was perfect.
For me, it just matured me in a weird way. Like I find myself in more sexuality debates than I've ever been. I have facts, I have things to back it up, and it's just I'm passionate now, when somebody, have something to say about homosexuality and it's in a negative light, I'm going to be there to defend homosexuality, and I have facts to back it up. And if we're going to bring it to the church aspect, I know Sodom and Gomorrah was about hospitality. I know when the word homosexual appeared in the Bible. I know those things now. So it's just not I'm some guy just defending gays just because I'm just, just a diva and I'm just pissed and I'm just angry. I know what I'm talking about, and it feels so good. And I use words I've never used before. What did Dave say in that monologue? It's just changed me, and it's awesome.
I really like Kaylin's idea of responsible art, and Morgan and I are actually in a band. I didn't want to plug this, but we're in a band, and I love how
We won't even say the name.
I won't. Common Shiner. But I'm always interested in how, like, music and theater, I've always, like, been kind of trying to decide which one I want to marry, and I'm always interested in how each informs the other, and I think one of the most important ideas I've taken from this and put into music was that idea of responsible art, because we were so meticulous and so thoughtful this entire process, and especially in devising. That's what I'm thinking about, and the way that that's affected my art in other areas. I think that's one of the biggest ways it's changed me as well.
I think the biggest change for me was I got on board because I needed answers because of my own story, and you know, I remember just being like this, you know, very conservative Christian girl, and I was in a van with a bunch of my friends headed to this concert, these new friends, and they knew I was Christian, and they all turned to me, they're like, so, we're gay. We're all of us in this van are gay. What do you think about that? And I just remember like freezing at me, like, oh my gosh, that's okay for you. That's okay. That's all right. You know, I just remember like trying to, and for me, like, this whole process has just brought me a sense of peace and understanding, and like knowing that I can love Christ, and knowing that I can rejoice in the happiness of my friends who are gay, and I can totally stand there and be completely confident behind them. And so, I mean, I think for this, I mean, it was different for every single one of us, and it's just, for me, it was that journey of finding peace and finding God in this play. For me, it was an extremely spiritual play, and I know that for me, it did bring me closer in my walk with God, and also just open my eyes to really appreciate His creation and the people He's created, and to continue to create empathy, and talking is like the most important thing, I think, for me. And just like, and I feel like that's what I really learned how to do, is to ask questions and shut up. Just, you know, be quiet and just listen, and, you know, and then just, you know, continue to walk together, and not leave someone behind just because you're scared or whatever. So for me, yeah, it was just a very, I mean, it was an emotional roller coaster. I mean, like we said earlier, I mean, there was a good number of us who had breakdowns at different points of the process.
I think everyone.
I think everyone did at some point or another.
Some more often than others.
Yeah.
It's like a nightly.
You mentioned listening. I think we would all say that that's probably one of the ways we've been changed too. Is that we're probably all better
listeners,
or more willing to like ask one question.
I think the main thing
of
is that we're
somebody
all
in their
better
story.
listeners. It's probably the main thing that I thought of just now.
Oh, I have to tell this one thing because it just came to me. But it made me laugh at the time, because part of my story is in here about how I never really had a formal coming out, and I didn't want that because I didn't feel like that straight people need to announce anything, or, you know, all that kind of thing. And so there's a story in there in the play about how one of my grandfathers had passed away, and I was with my mom in the cemetery, and she said that she felt. Do you want to perform?
Frank and I can go.
And she felt like she was really grateful for the partnership that she'd had for her life, and that she really hoped that I'd have a partner to share my life with too. And then a couple days later, I feel like I'm quoting myself from the script. She said that she, whether it be a man or a woman, she hoped I found that. So that happened, and then throughout this whole process, when my mom came to see the show a couple times, I was so nervous. I was like, oh, I wonder if she's going to, you know, remember, because we haven't really officially talked about issues of sexuality that much. And she came to the show, and I was so nervous and scared about it. And then I was like, afterwards, I finally broached the subject with her, and I was like, Mom, did you recognize anything in the script? Did you recognize any stories or anything? She's like, no. And I was like, but do you remember, like, when we were at a cemetery? And she's like, No bells. And I was like, okay. And then I dug a little bit deeper, and she still agrees with the things that she said. She just has no recollection of saying that. So I thought, for me, it's funny that it kind of gave me, because we can weight these issues so much and make them so
Crucially important.
so poetic and everything, but then it's good to have a sense of humor about it too.
Well, no, tell me what it was like to produce this as a group, communally together, versus doing it as a film. the difference between an intense communal production that takes place on stage, whether it was the first production or the second production, and then taking this out into the city of Grand Rapids in the winter and producing it there.
I think it would not have worked as well had we not had that community first. I felt like everything that we did together as a group really made it comfortable and possible to then do the individual work. So, I mean, that's just in terms of process. They both have interesting aspects working on those characters, but I think just in terms of the process, it was just invaluable to have the group first.
And then putting it actually in people's homes or in the church. I mean, doing film is much more
On
intimate.
location.
And you can really, I think it's a lot easier to actually, for lack of a better term, be the person, I think, in that kind of a setting than it is in a stage production where you have to be a little bigger than you would and just being and talking to somebody like we are right now.
To me, it felt lonelier because these characters were isolated, and maybe because I started with one who was outside and it was winter and totally alone. But here I felt like these people had support. They had people around them that understood and felt like they did, and now we put them out in the world and they felt a lot more vulnerable to me.
Yeah, I felt that way too.
I also thought it was, I mean, I don't know, I only did one day of filming, and it was kind of interesting to, since I don't live here anymore, to drive up here, do my one day of filming, and then kind of leave. And then since then, everyone else has done filming and such, and so I have no idea what things look like. But in the experience that I had the day, it was fun to, I don't know, to work with the film guys and to have that sort of, I felt like a little bit different community that was still there. So I wasn't just setting up a camera and just doing it on my own and then, you know, handing it off to someone. Like, I don't know, there was still that little bit of community there. And I think, yeah, you're right, that it was built upon the community that we established, the communal feel that we established in the first place. And so when we ran into each other and we were able to do those monologues, it was relatively easy for me to remember what it was like to do that with everybody around me too.
I think it's still, even though it's a wholly different environment, I would agree that there was a different but still palpable sense of collaboration going on still, even though it was, you know, most of the time it was just an individual person with, you know, the camera crew and Stephanie and all that, but it still was just, yeah, there still was some sort of sense of being a collaborative and kind of symbiotic energy still going on there, which was completely different than being on stage. And I imagine in your experience, because the stage performance that Frank was in is such a smaller venue where you were this close to some of the audience sometimes, which was different than our experience on stage. Yep. But it still is a whole, yeah, when it's just the camera, it's a whole different kind of thing, and not having that audience energy to feed off of. It makes it. I understand Mary Jane's thing about feeling vulnerable and more lonely. It's also, you know, it also has the capacity to be more intimate and more real, almost in certain ways, when they're in just in a different way than it is on stage. So it's. I thought it was a really interesting contrast. You know, it was a new experience to me to have, you know, change a performance like that, to have done something so rehearsed and so patterned one particular way on the stage, and then kind of have to alter that for a different universe. It was a challenge, but it was interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Like, although like our performance space was, you know, smaller, I still brought my stage voice to the camera, and you know, they were like, you know, just be real, you know, just be, you know, intimate, just be natural, and it was just different, you know. I was just like, you know, I'm talking to, you know, the camera. I'm like, you know, my normal voice. I don't have to project, and it just felt so much more real, and it was so different, and it was cool. It was fun.
I think the isolation was the big thing for me too, just to feel the reality of that isolation. Like, it is them alone. Like when we're doing it here, I know those guys are back there behind the screens and we're all, you know, moving around and with each other. Like there is a sense of community when you're on stage, but when you're alone, when you're in a house or on the stairs, like you are physically alone. Like, and even with the camera crew and everything, they're on the other side and watching.
And that's the reality these people are living with.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like that just having that physical distance and being physically alone, like I felt that isolation more, and I feel like maybe that was a difficult thing to portray in the stage piece.
So hard to act out in the cold.
That was a nightmare.
It's hard to get to the emotional core of the characters.
Right,
When
when
people
you
are like,
can't feel your
When you're freezing to the core.
Just stand on that ice.
It won't break.
The cracking is nothing that cracking sounds.
It always does.
I just remember
I can always
sitting
tell.
out on that porch at 5:30 in the morning, or whatever the heck the time it was, in that little trench coat I had, and
Nothing else.
and by the time I thought I got to say the lines, I was trying so hard not to let my teeth knock together.
Oh, sure.
I had pants on.
Yeah, but I mean, there's the image that one of the most powerful images in the play. I thought was a body naked in winter is what it feels like to be a part of the church and to be gay. You feel so ostracized, and so I mean, it was important for us to do that. too.
Fine, get serious. Yeah, say something serious.
The concept of the film. When we talked about how we wanted to film it, it was definitely that was.
It's a great central image.
I mean, that was from a long time ago, Stephanie. That was one of your images that was most profound and most kind of starkly honest about the experience. So I think that's that probably is the singular image or singular metaphor of the show. Is that we've carried that through. It's highlighted on stage, and that was definitely the impetus for all the outdoor. The colder
And
stuff
doing it
outdoors.
in winter.
It's kind of funny how that's come full circle, because filming that initial image that was used on
Which was
stage
probably over a year ago
over a year ago.
now.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how that's come full circle.
Last question here. What do you guys want the future to look like with this piece, and where should this go? What should the future look like with how people respond to this? What do you want to see it do?
Be the most popular play of all.
And the DVD becoming a bestseller.
So that it benefits.
Or to die, to be completely
To be unnecessary.
unnecessary.
Someday.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I would like to see
A long time from now, though.
organized discussion continue after each performance. I mean, I think that was an essential element of the success of the dialogue really happening here, because it's easy for people to go see it and then go out to dinner afterwards or get dessert or something, and not necessarily, I mean, I like the structure of having, because it's a lot of times, even with, if I were to come and see this or to see this film, it's so much. I mean, it's so much to take in. So to have an avenue that's a semi-organized avenue to feel safe and feel like you can just ask stupid questions or what you might think would be a stupid question, or to just have an organized structure of dialogue connected with this piece, I think is essential.
Absolutely.
But to let it continue as it's the group of us and our devisement team and the original cast and the subsequent cast and all that have been so personally involved, and it's so so much a part of us and has been for so long, that to have the film as a document now to what we've done and all that, and to kind of let that go now. Our direct involvement with this project and with these stories, as far as outwardly goes, is it's finally kind of wrapping up or coming to an end now. But just to have the film as a document to continue on and to let other people go and see that, and to know that it's still there, that it's still out there, and other people will be having these discussions. That yes, I'm excited and happy that has potential to happen. That we can, it's been so meaningful to us, and now we can kind of wrap it up and let it go. But it still will have this life and have this existence and continue to breathe and continue to foster the dialogue and continue to be affecting people, for however long to come. I like that notion. I like thinking about that.
Yeah, one of my hopes for it too is that it will speak in other cultures or other communities. That's one thing that we don't really know yet, because there's been maybe some buzz out in other areas, but it's stayed relatively local so far. And now there's it's being published and this film is being made, and it has just a lot of potential in a lot of other communities, and I hope that it speaks. I hope that it resonates. That's one of my hopes that I think.
I was going to say, how about a future where gay and lesbian people can go to church and say that they are gay and it not mattering one bit.
We don't even have to say it.
Not even have to say it, right?
Oh, they can be gay or lesbian and have it not
And it,
ever
and
have to
it
come up.
doesn't,
It's not
and it
an issue.
doesn't matter.
Go, please go.
Well, a song that comes to mind as we're talking is "Oh, for 1,000 tongues to sing my great Redeemer's praise." Just that the voices keep talking and praising. We had talked at one point even about setting up cameras so people could tell their stories, and so that more and more stories get added to these, and that it normalizes those voices, but also lets us all praise together.
Yeah, and going off of that too, I think one of the like from that story, like one of the most powerful things too is letting people know that they're not alone. That I think is huge, because I've talked with people who really they didn't know that there were other people in the church who are gay, and I've heard from more than one person that had a reaction like that boy did, that he just didn't know that there was a community out there, and I hope that this offers hope of community, and that there are people out there, and you are not alone, and
It would be great to see a website or something where people can actually connect from different communities and tell their stories. And I think that would be a good way to hear the voices. I hope that can happen soon.
Seven Passages MySpace.
I would like to see, because for me, I feel like in my church and in a number of different churches, the dialogue about sexuality and about being gay has gotten very tired and very stale and very stalemated. And so I would like to see a renewed discussion of sexuality in general within the church.
Totally
Absolutely.
agree.
Things things that aren't talked about, intersexed people, people who are raped, people, just not to group them all together sort of, but to have an enlarged discussion where this is a part, because it is just a part of many issues within sexuality that aren't really being talked about.
Yeah, I mean, heterosexual people in the church have loads of sexuality issues as well that are not discussed, that are very much issues that are not talked about. And yeah, so as a piece of that, just talking about sexuality in general. Absolutely.
As a video versus on stage.
No idea.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to...
Well, I think that for me, from the beginning, I've been my concern, I guess, with a film has been because there's certain allowances given to a theatrical production in terms of suspension of disbelief, and a certain actor playing 3 or 4 different characters. But when you put it on film, it doesn't necessarily translate in a similar way. So I think I would just hopefully, I would hope that a viewer would just listen to the stories, let the words affect them, not be concerned with, I don't know, all the technical elements and the suspension of disbelief issues.
Right, because I don't drive in real life.
She's not allowed.
That privilege was stripped a long time ago.
But yeah, the things that could be distracting in a film version of this that you don't necessarily think about in a play, because you can't just rewatch it over and over and go, wait, why did he lift his hand? What was that? But you can in a DVD. So yeah, because you can see the nuance of my performance.
You know what, though? But I think the one point that
I'm kidding.
I think the one point that David made was that it's not so much, being concerned about our performance.
It's the stories.
It's the stories that is the most important thing, the words, and Morgan's performance, I guess.
I'm gonna look like such an egotistical jerk
Lots
on
of
this thing.
different faces on these, right?
People,
Right.
I really hope that that people watching this will still feel a connection, even though when you're watching a play, it's really easy to feel a connection because the people are right there. But I really hope and pray that connection still reaches people through the medium of film, and that people can still foster dialogue and still approach this with an open heart.
With
And I
a
guess
big
if I
screen
could-
and surround sound.
Yeah, well, of course.
If I could go back to the very end of the play, when you said, tell us your story, we really want to hear. I think the most important thing people could do after watching this is go out and
out.
say that, ask the question to people you know.
And not just about
tell your
sexuality.
story.
In general, I would say.
Yep.
Ask people about their story regardless of their sexuality.
And what is your own story? That's also
Exactly, honor
regardless of
your own
sexuality.
story, yeah.